Rink Wide Vancouver. Pre-game, post-game, every game presented by Bodog. From sports odds to free casino games, make a play at bodog.net. Wadden and JPat back once again with another edition of the pre-game show as the trade deadline has come and gone, JPat, and the Leafs are coming through town on what should be Luke Schenn Appreciation Night.
Yeah, pregame, postgame, every game, early game, of course, when the Leafs are here. It's the 4 o'clock start. They got the early slot on Hockey Night in Canada. Despite the fact that 31 points separate these teams in the standings, it's still going to be an event. The Leaf fans will be out in force at Rogers Arena. And really, save for a visit from Vegas the rest of the way, this is it for featured games on the schedule at Rogers Arena. So, yeah, it's always fun when Toronto is here. We'll see which team ends up having more fun as this night goes along.
Let's get to the lineup change. It's presented by Delaney's OK Tire out there on Fraser Highway in Langley. Looks like we had some roster moves yesterday, JPat, but no morning skate this morning. Do we expect any changes in the lineup?
Well, of course, Curtis Lazar was shipped off to New Jersey, so he's no longer around here. He was going to be an option for this game. And you're right, the Canucks made a couple of paper transactions just before the deadline. Phil DiGiuseppe is back, and we'll see if PDG gets plugged right in. We know Rick Tocchet liked what he saw from him the first time around. Atu Ratu is no longer on the NHL roster. He was sent down to Abbotsford, but no practice on Friday. It was a full team day off, but no morning skate. So we're going to have to wait until closer to warm up. But I think you can be certain that Thatcher Demko is going to make his third straight start. I don't know if you remember what happened last time when the Leafs were in town. I'm sure the Leafs do, though. Career highs in shots faced and saves made by Thatcher Demko stopped 51 of 53. And Juho Lammikko, of all people, scored the game-winning goal as the Canucks took down the Leafs 3-2. The last meeting between these teams was in Toronto back in November, also 3-2. The Canucks got out to a 2-0 lead. Remember when they were leading games early and letting those leads get away? Yeah, that's what happened in mid-November. The Leafs came all the way back, defeated the Canucks 3-2. So, Canucks trying to settle the score and even the season series. I think the Leafs have their eye on the season sweep here as they roll through Vancouver for the only time this season.
As mentioned, the trade deadline has come and gone. JT Miller, Connor Garland, Brock Besser are still here. Wonder if that's got a weight off their shoulders.
You'd think so. Just so much noise around all of those guys, and at different times they were asked about it and how it was impacting them. And earlier in the week, Brock Besser said, yeah, this year it's a little bit different just because the chatter seems a little louder. But they're pros, and this is their fate. They remain Vancouver Canucks, so I would expect that all three of those guys will step up and play as hard as they can. It's been a struggle at different times for each of those players, but they know that they are going to remain on the Vancouver Canuck roster at least through the rest of this year. Come summertime, that's a different story. Those trade talks probably heat up again.
Home ice hasn't really been kind to the Canucks this year, but offensively, it's dried up as of recently for Vancouver.
Yeah, just one goal in each of the last two home games, and Brock Besser is the guy that scored. He scored against Boston last week, and then he scored against Minnesota the other night. Now, the fact that the Canucks are being held to a single goal in these recent games probably speaks more to the opposition than it does the Canucks, who haven't had trouble putting pucks in the net all season long, but we know what the Boston Bruins are doing. Ridiculous things that have never been done in the National Hockey League, up over 100 points. So they kept the Canucks in check. And Minnesota's on a roll right now, and they are as stingy as anybody since the All-Star break. So a couple of tough opponents, and another one coming in here again against the Toronto Maple Leafs. So the Canucks are going to have to find a way to crank up the offense if they're going to want to come out with the victory.
Probably has something to do with the fact that Thatcher Demko is back, but the Canucks have been keeping the goals against down as of recent.
Yeah, Rick Tocchet's still trying to instill that structure in his systems, and I do think that for the most part, he's starting to see some strides in the right direction. But you're right, getting Thatcher Demko, an all-star a year ago back. Now, he gave up 4 in his return to the lineup down in Dallas the other night, but he was good against the Minnesota Wild, and Kirill Kaprizov was the only guy that beat him, but beat him twice, so Minnesota beats the Canucks 2-1. Yeah, they're starting to get some saves, and they weren't getting saves for much of Demko's absence, and I would imagine now he's got 2 games under his belt, and every time out here, he'll get a little bit more comfortable between the pipes, and we talked about his performance against the Leafs last year. He would like to author something like that, although he probably doesn't want to face 53 shots. Yeah. But yes, when you look at the scores recently, you know, they held Minnesota to 2. They held Boston to 2 until Linus Ullmark scored into an empty net. St. Louis 2 before that. So, you know, for the longest time, I mean, we had the counter going there, 5 goals against the Vancouver Canucks. Really, we haven't seen an awful lot of that in a while here.
Speaking of getting comfortable with one another, Vitaly Kravtsov and Vasily Podkolzin, of course, they're countrymen. They know each other well, starting to build some chemistry together.
Yeah, looked good against the Wild and want to see more of that. So it's a comfort thing. It is just reading and reacting, but, able to set each other up for some offense. Kravtsov now has a point, so still looking for his first goal as a member of the Vancouver Canucks, but a sweet setup to Brock Besser on a first period power play the other night. And Podkolzin had opportunities. He's coming close, scored down in Dallas the other night. So, yeah, some steps in the right direction for the young Russians, and we'll see if they can take another stride here on this Saturday night against the Toronto Maple Leafs.
For the Leafs side of the story, let's send it to the Go-Goat Sports studio. David Alter from Rink, Toronto, tease things up.
All right, thanks, guys. Here's a look at everything going on Toronto Maple Leafs, and the big story will be Matt Murray, who was expected to make his return after missing about a month and a half, really, with an ankle injury. He hasn't played since January 17th, was supposed to play January 27th, but then an ankle injury flared up, something he had been dealing with, and he has since not been able to play, and the Leafs have been just very cautious because it was his second injury of the season, had a adductor injury earlier in the year. That was the risk that the Maple Leafs were taking on when they acquired him from the Ottawa Senators in the summer. Of course, Luke Schenn will be making his Vancouver Canucks return, perhaps, if he is selected. The Leafs went with 7 defensemen. We don't know the exact deployment for the Toronto Maple Leafs against the Canucks because it was an optional skate. However, it was very well attended. Only 4 forwards did not take part. And Joseph Wall, the third goalie, was not there. Another indication that it looks like it will be Matt Murray coming back in there. So that is the story for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Should be an interesting one. Obviously, 2 teams on a different path, but that's the story, and I'll send it back to you guys.
Thank you, David. Of course, JPat, a lot of new faces on this Leafs lineup. Might take them some time to build some chemistry themselves.
Yeah, you wonder about name tags. Forget the names on the back of the jerseys. Name tags right there on the front. Sheldon Keefe has decisions to make. But, go back a couple of weeks. Ryan O'Reilly, obviously, Noel Achari. But they were just getting started there. Jake McCabe and Sam Lafferty, Luke Schenn, Eric Gustafsson. So, absolutely. You don't want to call it full overhaul, but really some churn for the Toronto Maple Leafs in the weeks leading up to the deadline. Is it going to take them some time to find their stride and to find their fit as they work their way to the playoffs? They were locked into that first round matchup with the Tampa Lightning. And so really the remainder of the season, I think, for the Toronto Maple Leafs is just try to integrate all these new faces and get up to speed and hit the ground running when the playoffs begin.
The Leafs have lots of offensive weapons, but it's been Mitch Marner and Willie Nylander that have been leading the charge this year.
Yeah, and if people haven't been paying attention to the Toronto Maple Leafs, you just think Marner and Matthews. And Austin Matthews is having a fine season, not the kind of season he had a year ago. He was hurt for a little while, but Willie Nylander has stepped up. Marner leads the way. He's got 77 points. William Nylander right behind with 73. And then you get to that next wave, and what a next wave it is. Austin Matthews and John Tavares, both of them with 62 points. And then you get a guy like Ryan O'Reilly inserted into the lineup, and you can start to see the depth that this Toronto Maple Leaf team is going to be able to throw at opponents. But Nylander's having a terrific year. Got the great speed and the hands to go along with it. And of course, he can be a handful on any given night. And Mitch Marner has just been terrific start to finish, and certainly is the guy that the Vancouver Canucks are going to have to keep in check in this hockey game tonight.
This West Coast swing started off well for the Leafs. They got a win in Seattle. Then they laid an egg in Edmonton, but they followed it up with a tight win over the Flames.
Both of these teams today coming off 2-1 hockey games, Canucks falling to Minnesota. Toronto, and I don't think it was a surprise to anybody, Sheldon Keefe and the players, they were not happy with the way Connor McDavid and the Oilers ran roughshod over them. So what do? They tightened up defensively the next night at the Saddledome and came away with a 2-1 victory, fell behind early, but chipped away and got the offense that they needed. So this is an explosive team. We know that. We just talked about the firepower that they possess. But the Leafs can also be a really good defensive team. And I think this might surprise some casual viewers and observers about this Toronto team. Top 10 in the National Hockey League in offense, top 10 in the National Hockey League on the power play, but 4th overall in the National Hockey League defensively. And this has been sort of the weak spot of the Toronto Maple Leafs the last couple of seasons. Can they tighten things up defensively? Well, they've done it throughout this regular season, of course. Another question coming when it gets to the playoffs, but they're not there yet. And so I do think that that's a little bit of a surprise, but it certainly seems like the Leafs are moving in the right direction in terms of their play in their own zone.
That's a stat that stands out on the Leafs side, but this isn't a Leafs podcast. This is about the Canucks. What's a stat that stands out from the Canucks tonight? And of course, it's presented by Jason Hominick at jason.mortgage.
Well, anybody that's followed us, whether it's here on the pre-games or the post-game pods, knows that we have been charting the Vancouver Canucks in their quest for 70% on the penalty kill. It's a low bar, but when they've been in the mid-60s all season, it would represent some progress, and they are making some strides here. So this is the stat that stands out for me. The Vancouver Canucks have killed off 17 of their last 20 shorthanded situations over the last 5 games. That's 85%, unheard of for the Vancouver Canucks all season long, and they're not going to get anywhere close to 85 over the balance of the season. But in the short term, we are seeing them make some positive developments since the coaching change. So the last 5 games, the penalty kill has been at 85%. That is a stat that stands out for me, a presentation of Jason Hominick at jason.mortgage.
Let's get to my Bodog Best Bet. I'm feeling really good about this one tonight. I've got Quinn Hughes and Mitch Marner, both over half an assist each at plus 165. Now Marner is tied for 4th in the league with 55 assists on the season, and right behind him, Quinn Hughes, who's in 6th, that is, with 52 assists on the season. They love their apples, JPat. They're both getting one tonight. Put it down as my Bodog Best Bet.
You're just plucking the low-hanging fruit. I mean, this almost feels like free money. Why wouldn't you? I like that one. I think both of these guys are going to find their way onto the score sheet tonight.
You could win Bodog Bucks tonight. We're giving away $50 of it. Here's what you got to do. You can leave a comment below here on YouTube with the game-winning goal, time, and the period, or head over to Twitter at RinkWideVan and do the same there on the post. And we'll be giving away $50 to the person that gets the closest time. And of course, you've got to get the correct period as well. All right, JPat, this is what everybody's been waiting for. It's a big night down at Rogers Arena. The Leafs are in town. Who is going to do something in this game?
For the second straight Saturday, and for a lot of the same reasons I went with against the Boston Bruins last week, I'm looking at Elias Pettersson. I wanted him to have a sort of signature performance against a good team, a great team in the Bruins on a big stage on a Saturday night. It didn't happen. The Canucks only scored once, and he didn't have a point. And in fact, in the last 3 games, Elias Pettersson has 1 assist. That is it. He hasn't scored since the overtime winner in St. Louis. And further than that, I was just looking back through his recent game log. In the run of play, he scored in overtime in St. Louis, and he had the 2 empty netters against the Philadelphia Flyers, part of that 5-point night a couple of Saturdays ago. But in terms of the run of play, he hasn't scored a goal on a goaltender since that early morning start in Detroit 3 weeks ago. So this is a guy we're watching his quest for 100 points, want to see him get there, but his pace has slowed a little bit since the big night against the Philadelphia Flyers. So last week against Boston, there it was, a featured matchup. I wanted to see him rise to the occasion. He played okay, but didn't have any sort of signature moment then. But this is another opportunity. Usually when EP40 leads the way, the Canucks do have some success. So yeah, looking at Elias Pettersson, the man in the middle. He's my do-something guy tonight.
It's always a featured matchup when the Leafs come to town. And of course, Luke Schenn is back. The fans be able to appreciate number 2, who's now on the other blue and white. This has been another edition of the Rink Wide Vancouver podcast presented by Bodog. For Jeff Patterson, I'm Andrew Wadden. Remember, Rink Wide is the show that always scores.